And we're live. It is Tuesday, April 1st. That's April Fool's Day, 2025, the year of our Lord. And I want to point out that uh, I have been bombarded with memes the last 48 hours pointing out that you can't tell the difference this year between April Fool's Day and other days, and therefore it's canceled. Um, I don't know if that's right or not, but I'm just pointing it out. Others are going to make the judgment. And our April Fool's Day joke on Dogshirt TV is that the guest, the estimable Virginia Heffernan, and co-host Holly Berkley Fletcher actually kind of look alike. And
April Fools.
guys, which one is Virginia and which one is Holly? They have the same glasses. They've both got dark sweatshirts. There's the same blonde hair thing going. And there is the cheerful smile. So, I'm
Only
just,
one of them has a cactus, though.
only one of them has a cactus
True.
so
And the
far that
snowman.
we know of.
That's that we know.
All right, guys, I have three things to say for April Fool's Day, and I have even thought of one of them. Number one, it has been too long since I have seen Virginia Heffernan, and we were talking about it before the show, and we have decided that it is because we have been out of touch that all these bad things happened. And there was a sinewy thread that was holding the whole world together, and it was Virginia's appearances on In Lieu of Fun and my appearances on Trumpcast, which
Oh, I loved Trumpcast. Virginia, you need to bring back Trumpcast.
We have a new podcast, which I'll tell you. I'm going to
Oh,
tell you
okay.
about.
Because I loved Trumpcast.
so
I'm so glad.
this was the sinewy thread that was holding the whole world together, and we accidentally broke it, and
It
look
was one
what's
of those.
happened.
It was one of those like DuPont adhesives that turns out it holds every car together or
E-
something. And
Exactly,
once
or
it's
every
gone, it's
Tesla
gone.
anyway.
Every
Um,
time.
so that's thing number one. Thing number two, um, I love April Fool's Day. It's one of my favorite days of the year. And I'm a believer in actually tricking people with your April Fool's Day jokes. Once upon a time, we did what I thought was the funniest, stupidest lawfare April Fool's Day joke, which was we created a fake NSA program that we called Mind Prism, and this was during the Snowden stuff. And in Mind Prism, the NSA could just tap your brain and just, the slogan was, if they can think it, we can collect it. And they had a putting listening devices in people's teeth program. And um, and we even made up comments by the ACLU about it, about warrantless thought collection, and people took it seriously. And we had outraged responses that we weren't denouncing Mind Prism, um, and um, and so ever since then we've been cautious about doing April Fool's Day jokes on lawfare. Thing number three that I want to say, um, uh, guys, there has been a cactus challenge, and there is going to be a cactus showdown. But EJ informs me that both Holly's cactus and my cactus are inadequate, and he is going to find a more outrageous cactus. He is looking
But
for,
who's that cactus gonna fight? Is he gonna fight my cactus? Is this
well, I think he's going to take down
all the
whatever the
cacti?
winner of the
Is it
cactus.
cacti?
Yeah, it's there's a vying for cactus supremacy going on in the in in the Dog Shirt TV ecosystem, and
Cactus
EJ
bracket.
wants submissions.
Little tactic.
So if you find a outrageous cactus stuffed, foam, plastic, talking, dancing, whatever level of kitsch outrageousness you can go, just leave a message in the chat. Or in not in the chat, in the comments on a dog shirt. We are monitoring the comments for outrageous cactus
It doesn't
content.
matter because my cactus is gonna win anyway. So
I'm just saying, look, folks, you are watching Dog Shirt TV, and the cactus has a message for you about that.
You're watching Dog Shirt TV, an acting revolution in morning television.
Yes, you are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a goddamn revolution in morning television, and one of the revolutionary features of it, and there are many, is that we have a cactus showdown in which the cactuses do battle and vie for supremacy. And Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski don't have that, right? And another one of the revolutionary features is that we are reestablishing the sinews that prevent disaster. And to that end, we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed once again to have Virginia Heffernan, my old friend who became a close friend during the pandemic and during Jonathan Rauch, as I live and breathe. Look who's shown up. Um, and so, Virginia, welcome back to the show and to my life and to an introduction to Holly. And I assume you know Jonathan Rauch.
I don't know that we've ever met, Jonathan, but hello to everyone. Um,
So,
I like
Jonathan,
I
all
like
my
it.
past guests get this link, which you now have, and the rule is you're allowed to show up anytime, announced or unannounced. And the only one who does it is Jonathan Rauch, who periodically just shows up.
I think that's a statement of high character.
Do you, is there, do you, when a filibuster's going on like Cory Booker's, do you in the back of your mind think about the filibuster? I just think he's talking right now. That's all I'm thinking. Even
Really?
as, even as Ben is filibustering.
Well, I didn't even know there was a filibuster going on. What is he filibustering?
Well,
Life.
kind of everything. Remember, there's a not great opposite party president in office, maybe.
So
So
we're just slowing down the Senate today?
healthcare lawlessness slowing down the Senate, and I think he's on hour 13. I know
Wow, he's
that's
going to
not
beat
breaking
out Ted
records yet,
Cruz.
but he's a vegan, and my vegan son is very much cheering for his stamina, for Cory Booker's stamina, because he's a vegan.
And do we eat during can you shovel vegan food in your mouth and comment on it as part of
Vegan
the
filibuster?
vegan filibuster?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're gonna have to look back a ways to see when the last vegan filibuster was in the U.S. Senate. And I'm not sure if that was a 19th century play or what, or maybe this is the first.
It
There are
may
only
be
a
the
couple of
first.
vegans in the Senate.
I think it's
Who
probably
else is a vegan in this? And
I
Adam
think
Schiff is a sort of uh, is a kind of mostly vegan, I think.
I think it's possible that Tulsi Gabbard has an esoteric diet, maybe vegetarian. I'm not sure.
I would just say that Tulsi Gabbard is not a recommended like we're not gonna do the like be like Tulsi Gabbard
The
thing.
Tulsi diet, right? She's not an influencer in that way. Um,
Or unfortunately she may be, but
Actually, she might be. Oh,
yeah. Um, Virginia, how have you been?
I so I'm not gonna lie, as the kids say, it has not been a great. Wasn't a great fall and wasn't a totally great winter, but it's feeling a little better this spring. My father died in July, and then Donald Trump was elected president in November. He died on the day that Biden dropped out and passed the torch to Kamala Harris, and the night before he had sort of we had all anticipated it, and he sort of went saying Kamala, one of his last words. So
Wow.
anyway, that didn't come to pass. But he and Jimmy Carter both, you know, put their support behind her, and then I just had some rough days after the election, like everyone. But I had already, uh, I didn't want to be, uh, just completely flattened. So I thought, I'm not going to, you know what? I'm not going to pretend. I wanted to not pretend that however we live now, whether or however we used to live, liberal democracy. Oh no, Jonathan, I lost him. Liberal democracy. I didn't want to pretend that it was still alive and well. I wanted to admit it to myself that something significant was over, and um, and so coming to terms with what that thing is what I've been doing in various columns and also in this new podcast
So
with
tell us about the
Good.
new podcast. I
yes.
am going to vanish for a second to go pick up a puppy, but I will, who is whining, but
Okay.
I will continue to hear you.
Okay. Pick up a puppy for sure. The new podcast is called What Rough Beast, the Yeats poem that has been mined for so many titles, including Slouching Toward Bethlehem. At the very end says, what rough beast its hour come round at last slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. The idea is that things are falling apart and we want something, or we're looking to something new. And that thing may be,
This is the rough beast.
that's the rough
This
beast.
is the rough
That one
beast.
doesn't look
It's
that rough.
our come round at
Okay.
last.
I love that
Slouch.
part of it.
Yeah,
Wait, that looks like a little goat. Oh no, just from the back.
yeah.
Very cute.
I just want to say, I love that poem,
Yeah.
and I hate the way it is always chipped into little pieces.
Well,
For, but I do like the fact that the rough beast is its hour comes round at last,
that's right.
and it gets a podcast named after it.
I mean, we wanted to like bear witness to America's demise, but also try to imagine what could be built from the rubble, or what could, sort of make it this imaginative project. Because we probably need reserves of imagination now that we sort of like tapped out our good emergency responses in the first term, and now I think we're down to, you know, we have to start, I don't know, making fire with sticks and stuff like that.
So
You know,
who are you? Are you producing it on your own? Are
we're
you
producing
doing
it
it
on our own. Joel Patterson is producing, who was someone Mike Pesca worked with for a long time,
right?
and Stephen Metcalf is my co-host, who does Culture Gabfest on Slate and is an old friend. We both had Richard Rorty as our mentor at the University of Virginia, and so even though it sounds very sort of artsy, it has a pragmatism as anti-authoritarianism is right at the center of it. A sort of Rortian approach. But we've had great guests, and we just had Michael Tomasky, and really lots of interesting things have come of it. And we started it before the inauguration, so in the run up there was lots of talk about Luigi and also the IRA. We had Patrick Radden Keefe talking about the IRA. Like, what does radicalism even look like? And yeah.
Well, wow. It is a mark of how siloed our information ecosystems are that this is actually the first I've heard of it.
Well,
So,
I can't wait. I'll send you all links.
yeah, so by all means, send me a link, or I can look it up now since you know, since the name of it is sitting in my lap. And I am excited about it.
Yeah,
Is it
it's fun.
weekly? How often are you doing it?
It comes out about once a week, and we sorry, I think notably we had Michael Roth, the president of Wesleyan, on pretty early into Trump's assault on universities, and he lay out some really good ideas for how to think about opposition. He's also a Rorty person protege. So
Interesting.
Yeah. And so anyway, that was several weeks ago. And so since then we've pursued some of the ideas that he brought up on that episode. But once a week is the answer there. I don't know why I started to filibuster.
It's okay.
It's
It's in
Cory
the
Booker
air.
influence.
I'm in
So
the
Jonathan
process of
Rauch,
signing. I'm in the process of signing up. I
Oh,
once had a phone call with Richard Rorty. He was very pleasant. I was working on a book that I was completely unqualified to write.
must be kindly
It
inquisitors.
was Kindly Inquisitors, and I was probably 30 or 31, and it was one of the earlier drafts that were unpublishable. And um, I called him up to ask him some questions. I think maybe I showed him some of it. And unbelievably to me, he gave me some time and some advice. I guess he could be a bit of a terror in his philosophy, but in person, he was just a lovely guy.
yeah. Yeah. Well, what do you mean a terror in his philosophy, actually?
Well, someone who could be pretty radical
Yeah.
in terms of the
Uh,
epistemological claims he made. I'm
yes. Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
35 years out of date on the subject, so now I don't remember the substance.
Yeah.
But
I
he
mean,
gave very little quarter in terms of his
yes.
epistemic claims.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's sort of, yeah, in that way, loathed from the right, and then in other ways, loathed by the left. But yeah, and I'm not quite sure if that made him a centrist or what, but yeah, I mean, you're talking about philosophy and the mirror of nature and the epistemic claims, which yeah, or what drew me to him, and I think Stephen to him originally. Like those of us from the humanities, I mean, just to clarify some of this, those of us who started in the humanities really liked the fact that he was drawn to continental philosophy and gave Derrida a hearing. But he drew us to politics. So he had this strong idea that abandoning truth claims was the best way to marshal political campaigns to make the world better. So he loved a political campaign as opposed to a movement being something like Marxism, which he grew up with. He was a Trotskyite from a Trotskyite family in Chicago. And he wanted to abandon both that and Christian claims about a great future in favor of just of campaigns with deliverables, clear campaigns about. I remember someone asked him a question. Uh, what do you think about the gaze of the other, which was like a feminist, idea of the 90s? And he said, I just wish people would, devote themselves to getting more beds for female AIDS patients who were being left out then. He didn't want a lot of speculation and metaphysics about what it all might mean, and instead wanted us to get down to the work of democracy. And so that definitely is inspiring
Can
the
you
podcast.
remind me his importance as a philosopher? What that was
Yeah,
grounded
yeah. He started out as an analytic philosopher. Some ways that he sometimes puts it is that he was trying to square. Um, he wanted there to be a way to make ethical claims and truth claims, or sort of make an ethical life, a just life, also be a true life or conform to some kind of truth. And he wasn't sure how the analytic philosophers, so like A.J. Ayer, in analyzing sense data and all the strange effluvia of analytic philosophers, he wasn't sure how that was pointing the way to an ethical life, and he had a kind of crisis about it. And then he realized in very, very briefly that he needed to detach one from the other. And the way I read him, he sort of ends up encouraging you to make your private life beautiful and your public life humane, and they never need to intersect. So he had this wonderful story about having grown up a Trotskyite and feeling guilty because he was supposed to be for the workers' revolution, feeling guilty that he had these kind of slightly um, esoteric twee attractions to, in his case, wild orchids. He just thought they were incredibly beautiful, and he was so moved by them. But their delicacy was at odds with the Trotskyite program that he was drawn to. And he finally realized that the two things did not need to speak to each other, that he could find beauty in one place and find, purpose and a series of campaigns, next steps in the other one. And he said also we commit to liberalism um, just because we do, because inhumanity and cruelty is the worst thing a person can do. And so we commit ourselves to minimizing cruelty in the world, reducing suffering in the world, just because, not because of Jesus Christ, or not because of the worker, or not because of, spaghetti monsters. There are no truth claims undergird it. We just do. So,
I
I
uh,
love almost all of that. And I can,
which part don't you like?
so the only part that I can't sign up for is that there is no connection between the private beauty and the public commitment. So I don't begrudge anybody their orchids, but if your sense of private beauty is grossly, and by the way, and I deeply dislike the Trotskyite and other left
Yeah,
claims that the personal is political, that, you
right,
know, that that your love of something because it's beautiful is inadequate.
right.
But I do
Yes.
think that there are these people whose private sense of beauty or private behavior is irreconcilable with their public commitments. Think of Me Too, think of, the in the world of uh, the Marxist theory people, Louis Althusser, who, murdered his wife.
Sure.
Um, right? Like, I do think you're not allowed to have it's not that your private sense of beauty has to be, the workers with the raised fist. I'm fine with the orchids, but they can't be at odds with one another, right? Like, I
Yeah.
do want, you know, the private needs should be beautiful to you and not undermine the public commitment. I'm not asking for a lot of connection, but there's
Yeah.
like
Well, I
like
think he would.
Holly cannot be in the business of murdering cactuses in private, given her affection for them in public.
That's right. How do you murder a cactus?
I
You
don't
just
know.
like
I was
I
just
think
stifle
we're
I
it.
more
was just
likely to be
trying to
murdered by a cactus.
I was just trying to be bring the cactus back
Maybe
into
you
it.
defang it by pulling out all its little spines.
I have a
Yeah.
few comments, if I may. Um, First of all, Virginia has given me a post-traumatic stress flashback to graduate school with a mention of Derrida. I'm an American historian, and I hated all of the European. Basically, theory sends me over the edge. But anyway, but
Yeah.
I'm over it now. I got another cup of coffee, which I realize is counterintuitive, and I'm over that now. Secondly, um, one of the more disturbing things I think that I'm sort of seeing out there in the world that I not really inhabit anymore, but observe, which is white evangelicalism, is the attacks on empathy. There's like literally a book
Yeah.
someone has written called The Sin of Empathy.
Hmm.
And this is actually not a new concept, although calling empathy a sin is certainly the case. But I certainly grew up basically hearing that, you couldn't be too sympathetic to another person's experience, because then that clouds your ability to, stay strong in your beliefs. For instance, don't like put much credence or sympathy or connection into, a gay person's experience, because, first of all, their experience and their feelings don't matter, because there's certain belief and then there's a personal experience, and belief always trumps experience, whether in your own life or in someone else's life. And you don't want to get too soft in, connecting with another human being whose experience is a challenge to your belief system. So it's actually been sort of buried in evangelicalism for a long time, and even certainly I grew up. You're taught to be suspicious of your own experience and to even not empathize with yourself, if that makes any sense. But to just have it out there just so starkly in the context of the MAGA movement, I feel is just very dangerous. I saw a quote's been going around, the Hannah Arendt quote about empathy, which I can't quote exactly, of course, but now that I mention it.
The
But
quote is that
huh,
something like the
the death of
the death of
empathy,
empathy, the absence of empathy is the
right?
first step toward
That's
barbarism.
that's right.
I have not verified that it's a real Hannah Arendt quote because I attribute everything that I say that sounds deep to Hannah Arendt and make memes out of it. It's sort of like, everything else is everything funny you attribute to Mark Twain. But yeah, that meme is going around.
Yeah. So I find that very disturbing in the current context, even though I think the idea has been around in that subculture a long time. And then my third comment is related to sort of the practical application of ideas. One of the things I've been, and I don't know, I hope this is somewhat relevant. I'm not familiar with the philosophy behind what Virginia said, but one of the things I've been going sort of round and round with my far more rational spouse is I have this sense of like, every day I try to do something, put myself out there in some way, go to a protest, try to connect with other people, um, try to contribute in some way. And I don't worry about like, oh, is this actually going to produce results? Like I just sort of do it because I feel like at this phase, as I've said to Ben before on the show, throwing spaghetti at the wall is a bit like Cory Booker
Yeah.
filibustering. Is that going to produce results? I don't know, but it's trying something. It's
Yeah.
trying something. We
Yeah.
don't really know what the strategy is, and it's sort of trying something. I compared it to the Russians, covert influence campaign over the last 20 years. They've tried a whole bunch of
Yeah.
stuff all over the world. A lot of it's not worked out, but boy, some of it's really worked out, and it's very unpredictable what's going to work out. So he's very my spouse is very rational and very like we need to like study this and come up with just the right strategy. And I'm like, let people do their thing. Let people go to Tesla with their signs. Let people go into like tiny protests that probably are going to do no good at all. And so I wonder what your thoughts are or anybody's thoughts are on that in terms of do you need because I feel like what you're saying, Virginia, is that your mentor would be saying like it's the effort, it's the connection, it's the sort of emotional energy that is valuable. But I mean on a practical level, I mean maybe you do need a strategy, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, well, okay, first off, just quickly, Ben, I think that in Rorty's idea, at least, of private beauty, he sometimes called it private irony. I'm just like located in the 90s. Private irony, that in that context, murder, rape, sexual assault, those would all be considered public acts, right? Those are not, that's not your, uh, those acts are not the things that crystallize your sense of identity, which for him could be a passage of poetry, a wild orchid, a few passages of music. But your what we somehow call your private acts, like Pete Hegseth or Donald Trump, mauling women, driving drunk, those things are part of their inhumane public acts, not their
Okay,
beautiful
but so
private
then
ones.
change it to private consumption of child porn.
Private consumption of child porn, right? So there is I mean, this gets into some really actually interesting Rory territory that we probably like don't need to dive into right now. But I think that he, first of all, would take Wittgenstein's point that limit cases are like not all that interesting or worth doing, except for as thought experiments. But I think he would think mostly that whatever pornography, he didn't this wasn't a phrase then, but he didn't kink shame. So whatever, whatever kind of speech and images and art allowed under the law, if that was the thing that crystallized your sense of identity, then so be it. I mean, and certainly sexual acts and yeah, I mean, and child pornography is the limit case, right? Doesn't
Right.
represent a crime or whatever, but but uh, any kind of painting, all those things have to be allowed, right? That's the world of civil liberties, as opposed to the world of civil rights
All right.
and
As
our
long as
public
we are
commitments.
defining private that way, I have no argument
Yeah, I
with it.
think he says that crystallizes your sense of identity, and that makes it clear to you what dies when you die. That was one of the things he thought about. So that you're kind of constantly curating an inner life that involves, like I said, fragments of poetry, bars of music, the beauty of your, child's tousled hair, and all those things that make up, the entity that you are. But none of those things need to speak to your commitments to justice, which is just, I think that is his really. Then you do the separate thing when you go to a Tesla takedown, or you go to do a separate thing when you have this podcast and try to make decisions about how to comport ourselves or act together in solidarity in the public sphere. The book Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity is like it's I found it life changing.
And
And
when was it written?
that's his sometime in the 90s it was published.
And when
Somewhere
did he
in
die?
the 80s. I think he died in 2006. And Stephen Metcalf, so my co-host, who was a graduate student at UVA when I was an undergraduate, asked me to contribute to some uh, reminiscences about him. And the other people who contributed were like Daniel Dennett and some of his like public world foes. And I had just been an undergraduate who admired him. And so that's how Stephen and I came to uh, really come together on Rortia's offering pragmatic solution, a pragmatic approach. So
Super
yeah, he's in
interesting.
the tradition of William James. Anyway, as for political action and empathy, I mean, I can't respond as Rorty would, but I think this idea of civilizational empathy that Elon Musk is so critical of is a little bit like a Nietzschean slave morality idea. Like, we can't go around feeling sorry for people because the weak are just trying to drag down the strong. At least in the kind of Curtis Yarvin edge lord world where they hate empathy, they think of it as something that, like, that we're the master, that they're the masters, and that, like, why should they feel sorry for the slaves, right? Because then that just like uh
There is
emasculates
there is
them.
something very warmed over Nietzsche about a
Yeah.
lot of this stuff
It's amazing,
that
right? It
it's
kind of makes you think Nietzsche was like new respect for Nietzsche for having laid down that gauntlet.
well,
Um,
and but it's like they read the Cliff Notes,
they
though,
read the Cliff Notes, yeah.
right? Because like there's all this interesting complexity in actual Nietzsche that like they don't they either are so unsophisticated that they don't think about or that they don't recognize or that they are just sort of self-consciously omitting.
Yeah,
But he did distinguish between barbarism and power, right? That
yeah,
he was not arguing for the powerful do whatever they want and you know and it's a world without empathy.
yeah.
So Jonathan, what brings you to the show this morning?
Oh, the usual things, sleeplessness and desperation. Um,
Perfect. S&D.
I think
I have a quick footnote on Nietzsche, and then um, a bit of intel for Holly. My footnote on Nietzsche is that I did a dive in Nietzsche. I went back and read him, a lot of it for the first time for my latest book on Christianity. Because in a way, I think he holds the Rosetta Stone to what's happening right now, which is the breakdown of the supportive infrastructure of Christianity and modernism and the inability of anything to replace that. And he warned us what would happen. He didn't like Christianity, but he understood that it did underpin the moral values of modernity and that modernity was undermining it and that this would come to a head, and now it has. He's also the most reckless and irresponsible philosopher in history because although his theory of the world is only aesthetic, he really only cares about beauty and aesthetic greatness. It all sounds as if he's talking about political power and political
Yeah. And
greatness, and that's what
this
it's
is
become. And I think he
exactly,
knew,
I absolutely, that is a Rortian idea also. He loved Nietzsche, but in his lane.
yeah, Nietzsche, I think Nietzsche understood that this would happen. He alludes to it. He knew that he would be misunderstood politically and abused, and he didn't care. And I'll never forgive him for that. Holly, on the point you were making about Tesla protests and all that, um, Sarah Longwell, who's a political strategist and general thinker and actual real world consultant, did a conversation the other day with Bill Kristol where she said something interesting, which is that at this weird inverted moment, political elites and leaders on the Democratic and oppositional side, capital D and small d, are essentially helpless. And that the people who are empowered to speak and really make a difference are ordinary people, and the more ordinary, the better. And one reason for that is that they speak with a kind of authenticity and immediacy, which Hakeem Jeffries apparently does not. But the second, which is interesting, is that unlike, the president of Columbia University, ordinary people are just simply, for the most part, too far removed from Trump's tentacles to be retaliated against. They just have much less to fear in this situation. And that means that, unlike the usual situation, elites need to step back and simply and basically watch or help at best channel the efforts of ordinary people. And I just wondered if that isn't kind of what you're just saying.
Yeah, no, I think I listened to part of that conversation actually on Sunday. I didn't listen to that part, but um, I think that's a really interesting point. I guess again, to me, it comes back to how important is strategy or sort of overarching strategy at this point, and also how important is effectiveness at this point, because I feel like I don't know. I think at this phase, there isn't, like you said, there's not much elites can do. And it's also just important to mobilize the people and get some sort of mass movement out there. And I feel like at a later point, maybe, I don't know, maybe the leadership or some sort of leaders will emerge or the current leaders will be able to sort of graft onto the energy, some sort of strategy. I do think that it's hard part of the problem is, and we've talked about this before on the show, is America is such a big country geographically, and sort of coalescing the needed number of people to make a statement is difficult. This Saturday, I'm really interested. I'm going to the protest on the mall this Saturday. They're planned all over the country in every state. Um, and I'm really curious to see how big it actually is. I have zero idea. I know that in the sort of activist community, like it's very well publicized. I have friends coming from out of town to go to the DC one with me. So I don't know, it could be quite big. But I feel like the energy is important and people do need to feel like they have an outlet, and also building community is really important too. When I go to these protests or vigils or all kinds of things that I've been going to, I meet people. Sometimes I see the same people over and over again. We might exchange emails or just like I don't know, you just feel a sense of community and a sense of like you feel encouraged, like in a literal sense. You feel like fused with courage, and I think that's important. Whether or not the ordinary people will pay a price. So just an anecdote for you. So one of my good friends, who's the one that's coming into town for this, she lives in Ohio and she's been going to like every protest there, and she's been going to the Tesla ones. And the last one she went to, I think it was in Columbus. The Proud Boys were there. They didn't do anything, but they were walking around in the crowd taking pictures of people. And she was very unnerved by this because she she feels like, and she's a former real estate agent, so her picture and everything. So she was concerned, like they definitely took her picture. Like she took a picture of them and they took a picture of her. And she was concerned that they could start sort of targeting ordinary people in this, the Proud Boy, that there could be some sort of cyber thing. So we'll see about that. Of course, ordinary people have no money and connections to fight something like that the way the elite would. That's
It's
kind of,
also very inefficient, though, to go after
it
ordinary
is,
people.
but can you just make an example of it? It's like these detentions, like all of a sudden, and by the way, like I have friends here, green card holders here, who are canceling trips because they not only are they afraid of being let back into the country, they're afraid of being detained and sent to some sort of gulag because, and they've heard from friends, one of my Canadian friends here heard from a friend who recently returned that they searched her phone for anti-Trump sentiment. And so actually my friend was leaving group we I was in a group chat with her and she's like, I have to leave this chat and I have to wipe my phone because my kids are in Canada. I'm going to have to go there at some point and I don't want anything to be on my phone. And so I don't think
Wait, they're like asking for passwords, breaking into phones, and then looking at your social media on your phone
that's
or
what
your
she
text?
had heard from a friend. Now I don't know, it could be
No,
one
but
of
I mean
those
those.
urban legends, or there was a case documented in the press of a French person
Yeah, no, they can look at your phone at the border. Um, and it's the search authorities at the border are quite significant.
Oh, I did see. Yeah, see, I didn't even know that was like
It's
something
a
they did.
it's a real thing.
Okay.
Um,
So it's a really, so I don't know. They could make an example of certain ordinary people like that.
so Holly has one thing that she tweets out every day that I think is just really important and relates to this, which is this idea that every day you just do one thing
Yeah,
and you can't take the weight of the world on your shoulders, but you can do one thing and you do it without thinking too much about the connective tissue between that one thing and the salvation of the republic.
right.
Toward which end, I just want to say what my one thing is going to be tomorrow on Liberation Day. Liberation Day is coming for us all. And I am going to go to the Canadian Embassy in the evening and project an apology on the embassy. And anybody who wants to join me, I don't expect trouble from the Canadians about it, although you never know. Um, and therefore, I expect police will not trouble me either. So anybody who has anxieties about other special military operations and the law breaking component of them, this is one where it's going to be friendly, but we'll be doing it in French and English.
What will it
And
say?
it will just say "Sorry, désolé," signed the real Americans. And gonna, um, just uh, want our Canadian friends to know that, this is um, uh, this is not us. I
Yeah,
mean, it may represent us, unfortunately,
I,
but
I, Ben, I love that you do these projections. I think they're super cool. Is this the first? contrition projection
It is the
aren't
first
they?
contrition projection. It is
Okay.
not the first friendly projection.
Oh, it isn't the first friendly one. What was another friendly one?
So the Ukrainian embassy sometimes invites me to project things on either the Ukrainian embassy or on Ukraine House as a because it turns out that a lot of the things that are really hostile, if you project them on the Russian embassy, are just friendly gestures if you project them on the Ukrainian embassy, like a Ukrainian flag. And so
Yes.
sometimes when they have events or when it's Ukrainian Flag Day or
Yeah.
when it's, the National Day, that they'll invite me to project and the kids from the embassy come out and it's actually really sweet.
Just, Ben, I think the Oval Office one on the Washington, that was a bit of an apology, wasn't that?
well, it was a I think of that more as defiance, but yeah, I mean, I that's going to become that the base of the Washington Monument is going to become I think my main theater of
Worked well.
operations until I think I will use it regularly until the Capitol, not the Capitol Police, the Park Service police make me stop, at which point I will sue them.
I think
Um,
you're sympathetic, Ben, frankly.
well,
Um,
Yeah, I
they,
do. I kind of do too.
they have never even shown up.
yeah,
Can
I think that they're rather so I volunteered I'm waiting for my training. But I've been talking to some national parks people. They're stretched, very thinly stretched. They're feeling the pain all over the country. And I think they're probably sympathetic, or at least large numbers of them are sympathetic.
Well, I want to refine the ability to project on the monument itself and on the base of the monument is much more visible than when you project on the monument because the monument has these huge floodlights that are bombarding it. So once I was able to um, do it, but it doesn't look wonderful in real space. But the base looks fabulous in real space, and the police really don't seem to mind. And so I'm working on concepts that can exploit that. And I really think we gotta keep doing it. I may do something the night of I guess the night of the 4th, because the big protest is the 5th, or maybe the night of the 5th. Um, uh, and so we'll see.
So
I,
I'm
I,
I'm out
I
of I'm out of date on your activities. Are you still doing the Russian embassy on
They are my
Ukraine?
first love, and I will always, uh,
hassle them.
as long as they keep responding, I will continue to, they are first in my heart.
I
And
mean,
then you've now
really,
added the campaign that's related to civil liberties and Trump and all of that.
Well, so I actually think they're related. So first of all, the major projection that I did on the base of the Washington Monument was about Ukraine. It was, Trump and Vance betrayed America in the Oval Office, and it was the day after their Zelensky meeting. Um, and there was the one that went up the Washington Monument was "Don't Abandon Ukraine," and it was um, uh, right after the right before the Riyadh Peace Summit. Um, and so I actually have tried to keep them related. But if the question is, am I, monogamously committed to only projecting about Ukraine, the answer is no. And I do think, you know, I refined a certain set of techniques for, the if you look at the um, video of the betrayal projection, it's reached 2 million people on Instagram
it's
now.
amazing.
And, I have no other way of speaking to 2 million people.
Right.
And So, and by the way, a lot of the people that it's speaking to are hostile. They're Trump people,
Hmm.
judging from the comments, which, a lot of the comments are really hostile, and the Trump people keep keep it in circulation by responding hostilely to it. I have no other way to speak to that number of people
Yeah.
and to break into their ecosystem. So I'm look, I'm never going to stop projecting on the Russian embassy. But I'm also, you know, I, I, I don't, I do feel like the technique is transferable. And there are a lot of buildings in Washington that don't have windows that have faces in them that you could hurt somebody. And I reserve the right to project on all of them until the owners of those buildings make me stop.
I, Holly, I think, I mean, the projection campaign, the nonstop Wittes projection campaign, I think goes to your question about larger strategy. That, I mean, I've been working a little bit with Indivisible in Brooklyn, and they've just been at it a long time. They're just like wonderful old lefties, and they just each have their niche. So one of them said her love language is never letting Chuck Schumer get a good night's sleep. And that's just if you want to join her, you're in, right? It's like you projecting on the thing. And another one said she doesn't want to hear about anything unless it's to do with New York 11, which is a red district in Staten Island that she believes can be flipped. Um, so you just, you get your thing. And I think that as far as overall strategy goes, we saw, I think, a very beautiful and powerful and rousing campaign by Kamala Harris that had that kind of old Obama movement feeling. Like we're on some like grand crusade all together with huge audiences. The Women's March looked a little bit like that in 2021. But those things are not what's going to work this time. That it is like either a spaghetti at the wall or maybe even a kind of a Flight 93 thing where we're, trying to throw our cell phones at the heads of the people and like try to save lives while, creating some kind of chaos. I love the Tesla takedown protests. I think they're amazing. I think it's super focused
It's also
and
been, really effective.
really effective.
It
I mean,
has they're really tanked their stock price.
they're really
Uh,
tanked their stock price, and their stock price was hype with Trump, right? Like I love it when it's
and
down
just
to
to
this.
be clear, people, don't vandalize Teslas. We're not saying set Tesla dealerships on fire. We're not saying paint your friends' cars or key your friends' cars. Most of them were bought before any of this. We're not urging any kind of illegality or
We
violence.
are urging you to sell your Tesla if you have one
And
because
show up at a Tesla dealership with a sign.
yes,
And
yes.
I'm gonna go
shame
today, actually. My first one. If I can squeeze it in, I think I'm gonna go today. Yeah.
Oh,
shame people
really?
who are buying
There's
them.
a regular one today in Arlington.
I
So
mean, they're so great. They're so focused. It also, this is late stage tech where there are a lot of monopolies that have become shabby products, and and Teslas are less good than they were. We sort of lucked out because the pipeline is not that great at Tesla. Elon Musk has been AWOL. The board doesn't love, he's not investors aren't fond of it anyway, and their navigation system is much less good than
And
others.
Rivian,
The
man,
right,
that's
and
a
if
good
you
product.
really want a really expensive luxury, consumer that doesn't go, I mean, product that doesn't go through dealerships, yeah, Rivian
A friend
and
in Seattle gave me a ride in his Rivian, and
they're amazing,
it was amazing.
and
Um,
and then all these other cars doing better than them on the basics on the so I think that's a great campaign. Now Ben, you came to me to talk today because I tweeted
yes.
something.
So
um
let's use the last few minutes to talk about Virginia's Twitter thread yesterday that caused me to say, "You're coming on the show tomorrow." And now I've used up 56 minutes of the 1 hour talking about other things. The gravamen of this Twitter thread was too much empathy with these people, to go back to
Yeah.
a previous theme. Stop saying, yeah, sure, some of these deportees are real gang members. Stop giving away half the conversation before the other person starts. Stop stop being too fair. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, it's something like that. Like it sort of starts with this Solzhenitsyn idea of the non-participation in lies, that you may advance these lies but without help from me. That's sort of my first commitment. And um on Holly's point about these kind of chaotic uprisings, I sort of get the feeling like with Tesla takedown, right? You're not going to sort of disprove that Tesla is a good idea or that Elon Musk is a good person. But what you're going to do is make it a headache to drive a Tesla, and just make it a headache to espouse Musk views, make it a headache to walk around thinking Doge is a great thing. And I think the same thing about that lies are like Teslas. You just don't disprove them. You just make it a headache to drive them. And one way to do that is drop out of normal conversational decorum that you have with centrists or friends that are simply moving toward consensus around something and want to say, well, there is a ton of waste in government, right? As a starting place to talk about Doge and Musk. And, there's a way to find out if there's waste in a company. If you've ever worked for a company that's been audited by McKinsey, you know what that kind of spreadsheet looks like at the end. And it's not just someone saying there is waste, or there's a fictional USAID program that I heard about that cost too much money. You need a real analysis. So if someone says there is a ton of waste in government, you say, nope, there's no McKinsey spreadsheet. You know where there's a lot of waste, a galaxy of waste, is in Silicon Valley, where there's free iPads for everyone who walks in the door. And in response to, well, some of those El Salvadorans must be gang members. Oh, really? Have they been tried in court? Did they get their day in court? What was that like? What was the result? What was the verdict in their day in court? Was it a jury trial? Did you attend it? Let me see the results of that. But you know what? Trump is a felon, and I can send you that. It's these like slightly Vichy conversations that have really started to annoy me, where, we constantly have to give the devil his due and say, well, they are, Trump is doing something kind of right. Like it doesn't sound, it doesn't sound accurate unless it sounds fair. Michael
All right. So
Tomassi, yeah.
as your comment with Richard Rorty, I agree with almost all of this,
Okay.
but I have one tiny caveat,
Okay.
which is, you know, they're probably, and notice the way I'm saying it, they're probably, had you had a fair process with respect to those Venezuelans who were deported to El Salvador, were some real gang members among them. And I don't want to deny that reality. Now, notice that I'm not saying, sure, most of them were gang members or almost all of them were gang members. I'm not assuming, but I am saying, okay, I assume probably if ICE detains 500 people as gang members, it's going to be right some of the time. And I don't want to be in the
Why? Wait, sorry, but why assume that when there's been no due process? Like, do you assume that about the students they've arrested, that they
well,
must be harmful radicals?
so I do assume, first of all, the numbers are much, much lower, right? And so you could imagine that being, if you have a 20% fail rate or a 50% fail rate, you could imagine when the numbers are low, you could imagine that encompassing a much higher, and you get to do the kind of bespoke, okay, what do we know about Mahmoud Khalil? What do we know about, you know, the Turkish woman who was plucked off the streets of, you don't get to do that when you scale it. And so you have to make a judgment about what the likely hit fail rate is
I
going to
don't,
be.
sometimes you hear that 99% of people on trial, or something, 90+% of people on trial for violent crimes are guilty. And still we have the presumption of innocence. You can't cite that. Or you can't say, well, this guy hired a really expensive mob lawyer, so he probably is kind of a mobster. Or
So,
even, he looks like, what are the chances that he isn't a mobster? I just think we pretty much can't ever do that. I mean,
so I
maybe between you and your friends, you could say those, there probably are some of them that are in this gang, but not in public. Not, I mean, it's just, that's where our commitment to being humane in public is a baseline commitment to due process.
Yeah, so I will say I agree with that as a so when somebody says they're probably all gang members anyway, you have to confront that. And you have to say, actually, we have no basis to make that judgment. My only point of is that when somebody socially makes a probabilistic statement, I'm not inclined to be too picky about that at the social level in conversation. But I do think if someone's going to say,
Doing that, like, I remember Rebecca Traister said, like, if some innocent guys get caught in the Me Too dragnet, it's better, right, than if even one rapist gets off the hook. I don't know. I'm just not sure, right? Not sure. Like, this is
so
America, and to assume, like, well, all guys are kind of assholes, and like a bunch of guys in power, well, probably a lot of them did XYZ. Why are we even having that discussion?
yeah, so
I mean,
that
the detention, the imprisonment, the ritual humiliation by Christy Nome, those are the things that start the conversation,
I
nothing else.
absolutely and 100% agree with that.
Okay.
And if you are using one of these, you have to acknowledge that, or we have to give the devil his due on blank
Yeah.
as a way to distract attention from the problem.
Yeah.
And you're changing the subject of what the problem is. If the problem is gang members
Yeah.
in the United States, we have a system and a process for that. And if you want to use that system and process aggressively, that's fine. Go ahead, use it aggressively. If you want to round people up and just deport them, don't ask me to say, well, they were probably gang members anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that on that, we're just in complete agreement. And, my only point of disagreement is if somebody is going to make a probabilistic social statement about what the likely background
Hey
environment
Ben,
is.
I
Yeah,
think I think Virginia's saying she's had it with probabilistic social statements. This is a rhetorical battle, and it will not do to concede the ground to the other side before you even start. And she's probably right
I
about that. I have one question before we go. Virginia, where did you post this thread? I hope it was not on Twitter.
It was not on Twitter. It was on Blue Sky, and it's four posts, so
I'll go
it's
follow
no
you
like
there.
great shakes.
we are going to leave
Um,
it there, people. Um, Virginia Heffernan, it is so great to see your face again,
Wicked to
even if
see
it's
you.
bewildering how much you and Holly
Oh
Berkeley
yeah, I'm
Fletcher
gonna
look
put my glasses
alike.
on, but I also want to go to a Tesla takedown protest with you. They're so much fun.
Where aren't you in New York?
I'm in New York, but I'll go to a DC one, and
Yeah.
we've got some great Tesla dealerships here that need more harassment. So
Well, I'll let you know if I come up to New York. There's plenty of action here in DC though.
Well,
yeah,
in Virginia,
maybe we'll go
if you
next
want to
weekend.
come to the Canadian Embassy tomorrow evening,
What time, Ben?
I don't know, what time does it get dark these days?
Daylight savings, of course, has effed everything up.
Yeah, it has to be dark. But
8.
I'll be there, around 8ish or so.
Okay,
Um,
I'll come.
all right. Folks, we're going to be back tomorrow. I think we even have a guest, but I'm not sure who it is, and that sort of stuff. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right.